The Southern Wintering Systems Project is looking at how better decisions around winter management leads to more profitable dairy farms, good outcomes for animals and reduced environmental impacts. 6 DairyNZ monitor farms in Southland and Otago are involved in the project.
When I first started coming down to Southland, lots of people were concerned about wintering and not being able to get the performance out of their cows that they really needed to set the farm up for the spring. And so talked around with a few people and realised that although there'd been quite a lot of research happening with the wintering, not a lot had been done at the whole system level. And so what we wanted to do with the Southern Wintering Systems Project was to find out information about the different wintering systems that were around, what good looked like for each of those so people could fine-tune their current system, or if they were looking at changing wintering system, there was some good information around on which they could base their decisions. In terms of wintering down in Southland and Otago, I guess the key difference to other parts of the country is that we don't get a lot of grass growth, basically from the end of May through to the middle of August. And because of that, we need to transfer a lot of feed through that period to be able to feed the cows fully. And predominantly wintering in the past has been based on forage crops, so kale and swedes and more recently fodder beet, because we can get a lot of high quality feed into that winter period. But there's challenges with feeding that out because we get very wet soils. It's difficult for animals to move around in some instances, and there were concerns in terms of the environmental impact that might have been having. The project's based primarily around 6 farms across the Otago and Southland region, and those farms operate a range of wintering systems, so from I guess the traditional grass-based wintering that a lot of the North Island industry is based on, several of them with crops, right through to different types of housing and standoff systems. So those farms, we identified them in winter 2010, and we've been working with them since then to I guess capture as much information around how their system operates, but particularly around the wintering part of the project. So we're just finishing our second full winter of monitoring.
Drummond dairy farmers Glenn and Cherie Taylor own one of the 6 farms involved in the monitoring program.
We farm 120 hectares on the milking platform side, and across the road we've got 65 hectare runoff. We've actually dropped numbers back to 210 cows on this side, and we're self-containing ourselves on the home 120 hectares, and the 65 hectares we're cutting and selling, either as whole crop or straight grass silage. The cropping can be an issue as far as effluent in a confined space, also perception. I think perception is probably the biggest hurdle, is people driving down the road and looking at it, not understanding what's really behind it. We've half them on crop, and we've got a wintering barn there that can take 110 cows. We started originally, we were going to winter milk and we were going to autumn calve, but we've sort of changed that system away to just calving in the spring, but taking through some of the better empty cows and milking the late calving ones through June, July. So we are still pretty much milking through the year, we're just not calving twice. Originally it wasn't really so much about environmental, it was more our farm system. But as it's become more of an issue, we're probably looking at it slightly differently now as to what effect or with the barn, how much it mitigates the environmental impact we're having. So that's why it's been a good part of this wintering monitoring program with DairyNZ, to be able to monitor how much that barn saves us or doesn't save us environmentally, and whether we can do the cropping part a little bit better. We are well below the national average as far as nitrate leaching and that goes, even with winter cropping. So we've been able to quantify the impact we have, and the flip side of that is that while we're well below, maybe we can just do it a little bit better, maybe we can just push it a little bit lower, and that's where you come into your barns and and various other methods of wintering is being able to compare. Challenge is just pugging, really. We're on sort of drier, lighter soils here, so as far as pugging goes, we're not quite so bad, but the flip side of that is we've got free draining soils, so as far as effluent and that goes, that's the other issue. Cropping works fine, it's just the environmental side of it that we've got to try and fine-tune. That's why we do long skinny breaks. The cow's still moving about a length of a cow a day, but just spreads them over, and the food we spread right along the break, so they're not camping around a feeder and making a bog around that. It's spreading the effluent along the whole paddock.
Edendale farmers Alan and Julie Maxwell are also involved in the project.
The bulb sizes are quite comparable. And
it's just a good opportunity to get a lot of info out of my own system, which I wouldn't be able to get otherwise. We've had all our farms sort of nutrient budgeted and monitoring what effluents, what's coming off the pads and where it's going and at what rate, so we know whether that's sustainable or not. We're also getting a lot of cow stuff done as well. They've put little leg bands on it, like pedometers, so we know what the behavioural patterns are like on the pads, so we've been able to find out whether they're happy or not, basically. All our feed the silage gets all tested for us, and we get our cows condition scored every 3 times a year as well, so there's a lot of benefits that we've been able to gain from that. Originally I leased land and we used to grow crops, but I got sick of the baited trap and the mud during the winter time, and just getting the performance out of the crops. There's always cows that didn't quite perform in those sort of systems, and I thought there must be an easier way of doing it. So I had these big lines of trees here and they had sort of stand-off areas, so I just adapted those, but I made some concrete areas. We drained, humped and hollowed all the bedding area, which is wood chips, put drains every 2 metres under it so it keeps it quite dry. And just self-feed silage off on the concrete area. It's worked really well. Like, we put basically a whole condition score on every winter, and they're quite comfy. They've got plenty of shelter and they're pretty much ad-lib fed for the whole winter. We've got to be sustainable, and there's just no other way around that. And I think with these, like at the moment, I've got to have effluent consents for both these pads, and they get inspected by Environment Southland every year just to make sure that they're being operated properly and they're not doing what they're not supposed to be. And I think in time it's going to be like I could put a crop paddock in here at the moment, put all the cows on there, don't have to gather any of the effluent off that, but whereas this, I put everything on here, everything's gathered, it's saved, and then come springtime and summertime, then we can spread it back around the farm. I wanted something that was sort of reasonably cheap, that I didn't have a lot of spare cash around at the time to do something major, so this was, I thought, was sort of getting sort of halfway between. I've sort of got the self-feed and like, it's a wee bit like a freestall barn as such, just using the trees as my roof rather than actually having a roof, and it's worked quite well. Like the cows do really well on it and seem quite happy, so far it's worked quite well.
I guess one of the things that has become quite apparent is there's no real silver bullet around the wintering systems that we've looked at. There's pros and cons with the different systems. The environmental monitoring, it's been interesting looking at that in terms of the different farms that we've got, and I guess that's an area where we need to do a lot more.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.